on the News Channel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Hello everyone, welcome to Open Line. Look at this, full house tonight, and we have a very good discussion. We're talking about affordability in Nashville, and there is a conference, a forum that's coming up called Nashville Rising, Work, Wages, and the Future of Nashville. A lot of talk about affordable housing, but what about wages in our city? Are they keeping up with the cost of living? I believe that's what they're going to get into. But happy to have everyone up here. Let's start with Dr. Ken Chilton. He's Associate Professor at TSU. Dr. Chilton, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Avi Poster, you're with A Voice for the Reduction of Poverty.
That's right.
Thank you for being here. And Marsha Edwards, CEO of the Martha O'Brien Center. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So you've all been here before, and you're all going to be at this event on Saturday.
Right.
Dr. Chilton,
Yeah.
What is this all about, this event?
This event is, as you mentioned, you started talking about affordability, and there's been a lot of talk about housing affordability, a lot of talk about gentrification, but sometimes lost in that discussion is wages and keeping up. And what we're seeing from data is you've got a bifurcated economy in Nashville and nationally, where you have a lot of, or at least a number of higher paying jobs for people who have a lot of human capital and college degrees and such. But on the bottom end of that, it's almost what some observers are calling, instead of a service economy, a servant economy, who work in the hotels, who work in the coffee shops and restaurants that fuel the downtown tourism economy. And those wages are very low, and they haven't kept pace with other costs of living. So we're going to be focusing on that from multiple perspectives at this event on Saturday.
And Avi, what are you hoping to convey
Well,
with this?
The other day I heard our mayor say, and I'd just like to quote him, "Nashville is thriving in many ways, and that's a good thing. Yet the true measure of a great city is how it treats all its citizens, making sure growth is balanced by continually investing in its people." And what I'm hoping will come out of Saturday is a commitment from a cross-sectional representation of our city, business, workforce, nonprofits, educators, clergy. A commitment comes out of this forum to creating a moral covenant, a moral agreement that as we watch all the cranes and as we watch our city being called the IT city, that it includes the other side of it. And that's the people struggling to enjoy what others can afford to enjoy. So the outcome, renewed commitment to those at the bottom half of the economic spectrum.
And that has been the frustration. The city's booming, but there is this sense that people have been left behind. And I guess I want to ask you, what are you seeing at the Martha O'Brien Center, and just kind of what are you hoping to get across at this forum?
I think that a lot of times when people say, well, people should just do better, I think that's really a statement made out of context. And when I've been in context for 18 years at Martha O'Brien Center. What I'm seeing is people are ambitious, but there is very little ways for them to rise up. So, our minimum wage has not changed in 10 years. It's $7.25. And so when you look at that, you're like, that's $15,000 a year. You can't buy a bus pass and pay your rent, let alone eat on that much money, especially if you have children. So what we see people is either stuck, they know they're stuck, and I think the other thing that we've seen, because we've heard this from many, many people, is that my mother worked in a hotel. We didn't have much, but we had a paycheck every week, and we had food every week. Now, a lot of times, the service industry is really just ad hoc. You get a call on Sunday, you may get 40 hours this week, you may get 10. And so what's happened is those jobs at the very bottom, not only are they low paying, but they also have they become much worse jobs, because you just can't plan anything. And so, and it's a misnomer to think that people that are earning at the very bottom are not trying to rise. They are.
So you see that they are trying to rise.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that is, I mean, I'm fascinated when you say it's a servant economy, not a service economy.
That's me.
And that's you. Is that something we're seeing in other cities? Is this something that's worse here in Nashville?
I think we're seeing it nationwide. I borrowed it from some readings. I think the author's name is Faux, F-A-U-X, which is ironic. But, and if you think back 10, 15 years ago, jobs that we now take for granted in the service economy, or the servant economy as it's called, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, people who deliver your meals, dog walkers, jobs that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. That's how people are oftentimes stringing together enough money to pay the rent and such, doing 2 or 3, plugging in scooters in downtown Nashville and servicing tourists and things like that. So I don't mean it that there's not dignity in any of those jobs. There is. However, the pay is just not keeping up. And we do see rises in wages in the region, in the Nashville region, but looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data from 2010 to 2017, when you control for inflation, the raise on the median hourly wage was 40 cents an hour over that 7-year period. And that's not distributed equally. In some sectors of the economy, people actually lost ground. And others, like computers and technology, that grew by a real $4.30 an hour. So those people are thriving. But people who are doing the work to keep this whole economy humming are not. And that's what we want to address and talk about.
So you want to address it. What can we really do about it? I mean, you have very high, lofty goals, expectations. And that sounds great, but what can we actually do to make this happen?
Well, I mean, you're asking the absolute right question. Is we know what should happen, but do we have the moral will? Do we have the political will to actually make it happen? So there's some really good examples of action steps being taken around the country that we can emulate. There are cities who are paying better. There are cities who are actually, the culture is to offer people health care. My concern is that at $7.50 an hour over these 10 years, that's lost about 30% of its worth, given inflation. And we're talking Congress passing something like a $15 a wage a law that would take place in 2023. What's that going to be worth by the time it's passed? So can we do things? Yes. I think we can collectively raise our voice as a community and expect our policymakers to become far more invested in doing the right thing. I think we can invest in our people more than we are. I think we can provide more workforce development for those who are struggling and hire from within. I think that's part of what the conference is going to do, is we're going to make some recommendations and ask the audience for their input on what we should be doing, and then create the covenant from there.
Yeah, I would just add, Ben, that you know, we have the advantage of not being first. So there's 6 big cities. I mean, there's 7 states. There's a variety of places across the country that have done this, and they've done a variety of things. And some of that was to compromise for business concerns, but they've done training wages. They've stepped into the 15 to the 12-hour wage. And so we kind of have the advantage of seeing what's happened in those places. And you know, I think the University of California's Wage Center, they have a graduate program on wage evaluation, and they've identified that there was not wage loss, job loss in those big 6 cities. So I think that you know, I think that we need to really think about who we want to be in the future, and you know, a voice to reduce poverty is a table. It's a table for dialogue. So this is really about starting the conversation kind of anew to say what is it that we want to be. I mean, quite frankly, you know, we compare ourselves to the cities that are already doing this.
Like, who are some of those cities? What are some of those cities?
There's cities in, I'm going to ask Ken to help me, but I know that Chicago, there's Portland, Seattle, there's a variety of cities. A lot of times the ones we use as markers for ourselves have already done some movement on the wage.
But at the macro level, in terms of overall trends over the last 30 years, the bottom 90% have not seen a lot of wage growth, despite good efforts of people who are working hard. And I think what makes this stand out, what we're trying to do, we're hoping on Saturday that it's not just a bunch of us preaching to the choir, that we can bring in people from the faith community who see the dignity in labor and the moral worth of paying people a fair wage. And it's not just wages alone, it's child care policies for women. It's the opportunity for someone in the service economy to if a child is sick, to be able to leave at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to pick them up. They don't have those types of options. So to start a community debate that's not just community activists alone, that we can maybe bring in people from the business community. We've got a section that we're talking about things that are going well in Nashville in terms of policies or businesses that are doing things a little bit out of the norm, that they can talk about, the business owners themselves, their experiences in paying higher wages, paying more for health care, and those types of things.
Priority one to come out of this, would you say it is to increase the minimum wage? Would it be a mandatory minimum wage in Nashville, $15 an hour? Would that be, because there's some that would push back on that, and I guess I can get to that next, but do you think that's the kind of step we need to be taking in Nashville? I'll let any of you answer that.
I'm for it. Now, that doesn't mean that that's our only focus on this event on Saturday. As I mentioned, there are a lot of other parts of the compensation packages that are important for people to live a high quality of life. Not necessarily the highest standard of living, but a high quality of life, and things that make people's lives easier as employees and such. Pay is one of those big items. But again, think back, we have outsourced retirement to the individual. We don't get pensions as much as we used to. Many of us don't have those. Cost of higher education has gotten outrageous. I'm in that industry. All of these things that we used to take for granted are no longer there, and we've all become free agents. The biggest, a growing sector here in Nashville, and the biggest leaser of property in New York City is WeWork, which are these workspaces for people who are kind of not working for a company in their office, but kind of freelancing and such. So we have more and more of those people. So how do we protect them? How do we build a good quality of life for all of those people that we who do have higher educations and have higher incomes take for granted?
So going into the forum, you know, I could tell you what I'd like to see come out of it, but this is really asking the voice of the community what they'd like to see out of it. The breadth of this forum is clear. It's to ask out loud if we are spending enough time intentionally and aggressively supporting those who have the least. And I think the answer to that is we're not. And when you look at the development of the city, I'm proud of it. When my friends come and visit, I show off downtown. I'm really proud of people saying I did not move somewhere that they don't understand why I moved to. I'm proud to be a Nashvilleian. On the other hand, there are people who aren't enjoying it. So when you ask the question, what's the outcome? There are conversations like we're having taking place all over the city. We're bringing all those conversations hopefully into one room to raise one loud voice, one shared commitment that will make a difference in those who need to hear that voice.
And I guess, does this come about just because we talk about it and there's this kind of collective consensus, or does it come about through legislation, through some sort of something the council does? Or the legislature, which is, I don't know that that's going to happen, but the council, is that, what are you hoping to do? Just kind of educate and go about it that way, or is it actual legislation before the Metro Council, that kind of thing? It
is our purpose to educate and activate. So I think that you know, what we know is that when you change the conversation, then things move beyond you. You know, and I think that. I think think about this from this economic kind of scale. Here in Tennessee, our state, the vitality of our state depends on the sales tax. So when you suppress the minimum wage, which, because it's not tied to inflation, it has been suppressed for 10 years. So when you suppress the minimum wage, then people cannot earn, they cannot spend, and they do not pay sales tax, or they pay very little. They certainly, if you're living on raising 2 kids on $15,000 a year, you're not buying a lawnmower, you're not buying a refrigerator, you're not buying the second or third set of school uniforms that you really need for your kids. But you're definitely not buying that washer that would change your life. So I think that, you know, when we look at this, it's not in our interest, because of our tax system, to suppress the minimum wage. What we need is people working and earning. That's what brings vitality in this state. I'm an employer.
That's an interesting argument, because so often I haven't heard that argument before, but I always hear the argument, if we raise the minimum wage, it's going to cost jobs. You know, it's going to hurt us more than it helps us. And what do you think of that?
I think not. I don't think the evidence is there that. And that's why I say we have this advantage of not have gone first. Yeah, will there be some impacts? There probably will, and that's why it is really important that we do have a citywide conversation. And eventually, yes, it will have to have impact somewhere else. But the reality is there's been 10 years with no change to the minimum wage. So if we say, well, throw up our hands, we can't do anything because our legislature won't let us. You know, the reality is we have to put pressure on our legislature, and the other cities on this and other counties need to do that too. I mean, my family business was a farm. I really do understand how narrow the margins are in some businesses. I'm an employer now, so I think I take all these things very, very seriously. But I also know that it can't be, you know, if you don't want your city completely fractured on class, on economic class, then you have to do two things. You have to make sure that your lowest wages are fair, based on what is the cost of living in your city. And the second thing you have to do is you're going to have to provide more steps up for those who are low skilled and maybe undereducated. And so I think, you know, part of what I hope happens at the forum is that we have conversations that think, like, what could we do more creatively? Some of it is just being a better manager, quite frankly. If you look at Jefferson County, Colorado, they basically tore down the silos between the child care benefits, those certificates that were available, and the workforce money, put those things together so people could sustain employment and could have jobs that had benefits.
Interesting. And I like what you said about fractured by class. I think we have to take a break. And then I want to address that. And then we'll start taking calls. Vicki and others on the line, hold on if you want to call in. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break, come back right after this.